The address was familiar. That was the first thing Min-Jae noticed. Not a warehouse. Not an underground facility. Not some hidden location buried beneath layers of misdirection the way everything else in this war had been. It was a building he knew. A building he had been inside dozens of times. The Kongji Tower. 43 floors of glass and steel rising out of the heart of the financial district, a building that bore both their names. Built on a handshake deal 11 years ago when two young men had looked at each other across a conference table and decided that what they could build together was worth more than what either of them could build alone. Min-Jae stood on the pavement outside it and looked up. The top floor was lit. Every other floor was dark. Ji-Hoon was up there, waiting, in a building that was half Min-Jae's. The arrogance of that choice was so precise, so deliberate, so entirely Ji-Hoon that Min-Jae almost felt something close to respect. Almost. He pushed through the front entrance. The lobby was empty. The security desk was vacant. The usual hum of card readers and elevator chimes and the ambient noise of a building breathing with human activity, all of it was gone. Stripped out. Just marble floors and low light, and the sound of Min-Jae's footsteps moving through silence, like a blade through still water. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. Of course they did. He stepped in, pressed the button for the 43rd floor, watched the doors close. And in the mirrored surface of the elevator wall, he looked at himself for the first time in what felt like days. He looked exactly like a man who had not slept, who had not stopped, who had poured every resource and every calculated move and every carefully constructed strategy into a war that was not supposed to be personal and had become the most personal thing he had ever fought. He looked like someone who had been tested to the edge of what a person could hold together. And he was still standing. The elevator rose, floor by floor. And Min-Jae used those seconds the way he used every available resource, efficiently, completely, without waste. He breathed. He centered. He let go of every emotion that was not useful to him in the next 60 minutes. The grief of betrayal set aside. The anger of 11 years reframed in a single phone call set aside. The image of Amara tied to a chair, her voice trembling through a screen set aside. Not erased. Never erased. But contained. Managed. Because emotion without direction was just damage. And Min-Jae did not have room for damage tonight. The elevator slowed. Stopped. The doors opened. And Min-Jae stepped out into the 43rd floor, and for a moment, just a moment, the sight of it stopped him. He had been in this room 100 times. It had looked different every single one of those times, depending on the light, the season, the occasion. He had signed deals here. Celebrated here. Had arguments here that ended in solutions, the way good arguments between people who trusted each other always did. Now it looked like none of those things. It looked like an ending. Ji-Hoon was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window at the far end of the room. His back was to the door. His hands were clasped behind him. He was looking out at the city, the same city they had both spent over a decade shaping, piece by piece, from the very room they were standing in. He didn't turn when Min-Jae entered. "I used to come up here alone," Ji-Hoon said. "Before the company was big enough to fill all the floors below us. When it was just the two of us and a team small enough to fit in a single room." Min-Jae didn't respond. "Do you remember that?" Ji-Hoon asked. "Yes," Min-Jae said. "I used to think." Ji-Hoon paused. "I used to think that what we were building was going to change things. Not just for us. For everyone who came after us. People who looked like us. People who started with nothing like we did." Min-Jae moved slowly into the room. "Steady. Watching." "It did," Min-Jae said. "It did," Ji-Hoon agreed. A pause. "And then it wasn't enough," Ji-Hoon said. He turned around. And Min-Jae looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the name had come through the phone like a detonation. Ji-Hoon looked the same. That was somehow the most unsettling part. He looked exactly like the man Min-Jae had known for 11 years. Same composure. Same quiet intelligence in his eyes. Same way of holding himself that always suggested he was the calmest person in any room and had already considered every possible outcome before anyone else had finished forming their first thought. He looked like Ji-Hoon. He looked like his oldest ally. He looked like someone Min-Jae had trusted without ever questioning whether that trust had been earned or simply assumed. How long? Min-Jae asked. Ji-Hoon didn't pretend not to understand the question. 7 years, he said. 7 years. Min-Jae absorbed that number quietly. 7 years of shared boardrooms and strategy sessions and private conversations and handshakes and the particular kind of intimacy that exists between two people who have built something together from the ground up. 7 years of performance. Why? Min-Jae asked. And that was the real question. Not the logistics. Not the mechanics of how it had been done. Min-Jae understood all of that already, or could reconstruct it. The why was the thing that mattered. The thing that no amount of investigative data could answer. Ji-Hoon studied him for a moment. Then he walked toward the center of the room. Because you were always going to be the most powerful person in every room you entered, Ji-Hoon said. And I decided very early that it was better to be the person beside that kind of power than to spend my life competing against it. Min-Jae said nothing. The network needed access, Ji-Hoon continued. Access to markets, to government relationships, to financial infrastructure that took you a decade to build. And I was the bridge. He paused. Not a reluctant bridge. A willing one. You handed them information, Min-Jae said. Strategically. You gave them Amara. Something shifted in Ji-Hoon's expression. Not guilt. Something more complicated than guilt. I gave them a thread, he said. I didn't anticipate how far they would pull it. That's not an answer. No, Ji-Hoon said quietly. It's not. If you've been following the story from the very beginning, this is the moment everything you suspected either gets confirmed or completely collapses. Comment right now, did you see Ji-Hoon coming? Were there signs? Because looking back, they were always there. The city sprawled behind Ji-Hoon through the glass, vast, indifferent, glittering with the accumulated light of millions of lives being lived completely unaware of what was unfolding 43 floors above them. Min-Jae looked at his oldest ally and felt the full weight of what betrayal actually costs. Not the strategic damage. Not the financial exposure. Not the weeks of war and the sleepless nights and the resources poured into dismantling something that should never have needed dismantling. The cost of having trusted someone completely. And having been wrong. There's something you need to understand, Ji-Hoon said. His voice had shifted, still calm, but differently calm. The way a man sounds when he's moving past performance into something raw. I'm listening, Min-Jae said. I didn't come here to fight you. Min-Jae's eyes didn't move. And I didn't come here to run, Ji-Hoon continued. I came here because when everything collapsed tonight, and I knew it would, I knew the moment your investigator breached the communication hub that the timeline had accelerated beyond recovery. There was only one person I wanted to face at the end of it. He held Min-Jae's gaze. You. Silence. Heavy. The kind that only exists between two people with a decade of shared history standing on opposite sides of an uncrossable line. That's supposed to mean something, Min-Jae said. It means I still have some part of what we built in me, Ji-Hoon said. Whatever else I became. Whatever I let them turn me into. Min-Jae studied him. The network, Min-Jae said. The people above you. The ones my filing tonight didn't reach. How many are there? Ji-Hoon smiled faintly. Not with warmth. With something that looked almost like relief. Like a man who has been carrying something enormous and is finally setting it down. You still want information, Ji-Hoon said. I still want to finish this, Min-Jae replied. Completely. Even now. Even standing here. Ji-Hoon shook his head slowly. This is why they couldn't absorb you. You don't stop. Not even for grief. Not even for this. Tell me how many, Min-Jae said. Ji-Hoon was quiet for a long moment. Then 3. 3 people above you. 3 people who have never appeared in any file, any transaction, any communication trail that can be traced. 3 people who have spent 30 years building invisibility so complete that even the people inside the network don't know their identities. Min-Jae processed that. But you do, he said. Ji-Hoon met his eyes. Yes. And you're going to give them to me. It wasn't a question. Ji-Hoon looked at him for a long, measured moment. Like he was deciding something. Like he was standing at a door he had always known was there and was finally choosing whether to open it. If I do, Ji-Hoon said slowly, there is no version of my life after tonight that looks anything like what it was. There was never going to be, Min-Jae said. No, Ji-Hoon said. There wasn't. Another pause. I need something from you, Ji-Hoon said. Min-Jae waited. Not immunity. Not protection. Not a reduced consequence. Ji-Hoon's voice was precise. I need you to understand that not everything I did in 7 years was for them. Some of it, the companies we saved, the people we employed, the infrastructure we built, that was real. That was ours. I need you to know that I didn't hand all of it to them. Min-Jae looked at him. For a long time. And what he felt in that moment was not what he expected to feel. It wasn't forgiveness. It was too early and too complicated for that. It wasn't rage either. Rage had burned clean and cold into something more useful hours ago. It was something more like grief. The grief of understanding that people are rarely entirely one thing. That the man who had betrayed him and the man who had built something real alongside him were the same person. That both versions had existed simultaneously for 7 years and Min-Jae had only ever seen one of them. I know, Min-Jae said finally. Ji-Hoon exhaled. Slowly. Like something had released. The 3 names, Min-Jae said. Ji-Hoon nodded. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a single envelope. Held it out. Min-Jae crossed the room and took it. He didn't open it immediately. He held it and looked at Ji-Hoon one last time. After tonight, Min-Jae said, we don't speak again. Ji-Hoon held his gaze. I know, he said. Min-Jae turned toward the elevator. He had taken 3 steps when Ji-Hoon spoke again. Min-Jae. He stopped. Didn't turn. There's something else, Ji-Hoon said. Something I didn't put in the envelope. Something I debated telling you at all. The air in the room changed. Min-Jae turned around slowly. And the expression on Ji-Hoon's face was different now. The composure was still there. But beneath it, beneath the careful architecture of a man who had spent 7 years managing every angle of every situation, there was something that looked almost like fear. Not of Min-Jae. Of what he was about to say. It's about Amara, Ji-Hoon said. Min-Jae went very still. The reason the network came back for her, Ji-Hoon said slowly. The reason they used her as leverage against you specifically. He paused. It wasn't just because she was someone you cared about. Min-Jae's eyes darkened. Then what was it? He asked. Ji-Hoon looked at him. It was because of what she found, he said. 8 years ago. When she was still inside the network and she pulled a thread she wasn't supposed to pull. He exhaled. She didn't just find a list of names, Min-Jae. She found a document. A founding document. The original architecture of the entire network, every mechanism, every structure, every hidden layer, all of it laid out in a single file. Min-Jae said nothing. She took it, Ji-Hoon said. She copied it before she disappeared. And she has been carrying it ever since. The network has known this the entire time. Everything they have done, every move against her, every threat, every use of her as leverage against you, has been about recovering that document. Silence. They don't just want her cooperation, Ji-Hoon said. They want what she's been holding for 8 years. The room felt like it had contracted. Like the walls had moved several inches closer. Min-Jae's mind was already moving, already reconstructing the timeline, already reframing everything Amara had told him in the car, already understanding that even her confession, as raw and real as it had felt, had been missing this one final piece. The document. The founding document of the entire network. Which meant Amara had been holding the most dangerous object in this entire war in her possession for 8 years. And she hadn't told him. Min-Jae's phone buzzed. He looked down. A message from Amara. 4 words. We need to talk. And then, before Min-Jae could process that, a second message. From an unknown number. Also 4 words. We have her again. If you just read those last 4 words and felt your heart drop, good. That means this story is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Like this right now, share it with everyone you know, and subscribe if you haven't already, because the next segment is coming and it will not slow down. The document. The network's final move. And a choice Min-Jae has to make that will define everything. Min-Jae read both messages twice. Not because he didn't understand them the first time. Because he needed to be certain his mind wasn't filling in details that weren't there, the way a desperate mind sometimes does when it receives information it doesn't want to be true. But the words didn't change. We need to talk. We have her again. He looked up at Ji-Hoon. Ji-Hoon had seen the shift in his face. They moved faster than you expected, Ji-Hoon said quietly. It wasn't a question. How? Min-Jae asked. His voice was controlled, but the edges of it were sharp in a way that hadn't been there moments ago. My investigator was 2 minutes from her location. She was in a locked car. No one knew where we stopped. Ji-Hoon's expression did something complicated. Unless someone told them, Min-Jae said. The silence that followed was brief, but it was the kind of brief that contains an enormous amount. Ji-Hoon. I didn't make any calls after you walked into this building, Ji-Hoon said. I gave you my word when I asked you to come here. I honored that. Min-Jae studied him. Every micro-expression. Every shift in posture. Every tell that 11 years of knowing someone gives you access to whether you want it or not. Ji-Hoon wasn't lying. Which meant the breach had come from somewhere else. Min-Jae's mind moved fast, cataloging, reconstructing, running backward through the last hour with the precision of someone who had spent days thinking 3 moves ahead of people who were also thinking 3 moves ahead. The car. The location where he had parked when he got out. The route he had taken from the building where he retrieved Amara. Someone had tracked the route. Not Ji-Hoon. Not the man he had confronted tonight. Someone else entirely. One of the 3 names in the envelope he was still holding. They had been watching this entire time. Not reactively, not scrambling the way the lower levels of the network had been scrambling for days. Patiently. Letting the war play out beneath them while they waited for the precise moment when Min-Jae would be in one location and Amara would be in another. This was the move Ji-Hoon had been afraid to name. The card nobody saw coming. Min-Jae looked at the envelope in his hand. Then he looked at Ji-Hoon. The 3 names, he said. Which one of them moves like this? Ji-Hoon didn't hesitate. The first name in the envelope, he said. She is the one you need to worry about. She. Min-Jae's eyes sharpened. Open it, Ji-Hoon said. Read the first name. And then understand that everything you've done up to tonight, every account frozen, every layer dismantled, every person arrested, was the part of this network that she was willing to sacrifice. Min-Jae stared at him. She let all of it fall, Ji-Hoon said. She let you burn it down. Because she wanted the document. And she knew the only way to flesh it out was to push Amara to the point where she would have no choice but to use it. The room felt like it tilted slightly. Not physically, but in the way that reality tilts when you realize the frame you've been using to understand a situation was never the right frame. This entire war, Min-Jae said slowly, was engineered, Ji-Hoon confirmed. Not started by you. Started by her. Designed to end with the document in her hands and every expendable layer of the network removed, cleaned out, actually, because they had become liabilities. He paused. You didn't dismantle the network, Min-Jae. You performed the maintenance she needed done. The silence that followed was the loudest Min-Jae had ever stood inside. Every move he had made in 72 hours replayed in his mind at speed. Every victory. Every frozen account. Every arrested figure. Every layer peeled back. All of it, aloud. All of it, part of a design he hadn't authored. And then, underneath the shock of that, underneath the cold fury of understanding how completely the frame had been built around him, something else arrived. Something quiet. Something that steadied him instead of breaking him. Because this changed the tactics. It didn't change the outcome. If you thought this story had already hit its highest point, I need you to understand right now that we are only just arriving at the real game. Like this, share it, and hold on. Min-Jae opened the envelope. He read the first name. And the last piece of everything clicked into place. He had heard the name before. Not in the context of a network. Not in the context of criminal infrastructure or financial warfare, or the kind of invisible power that operates in the spaces between institutions. He had heard it in a boardroom. 2 years ago. A brief introduction at an international financial summit, the kind of event where the most important conversations happen in corridors and side rooms and quiet exchanges that never appear in any official record. A woman who had been described to him as a philanthropist. An investor. A person of significant but understated influence who preferred to work through intermediaries rather than occupy the front of any room. He had shaken her hand. She had looked at him with eyes that were warm and completely unreadable at the same time. He had thought nothing of it. He thought something of it now. He folded the envelope, put it in his jacket, and called his investigator. 1 ring. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, Min-Jae said the moment the line connected. The investigator's voice was tight. Controlled, but tight, the sound of a professional managing something that had gone wrong in a way they hadn't prepared for. I was 30 seconds from the car, the investigator said. 30 seconds. When I arrived, the door was open. She was gone. No signs of struggle significant enough to suggest she resisted. Which means she went with them, Min-Jae said. A pause. Or she was taken so quickly that resistance wasn't possible, the investigator replied carefully. No, Min-Jae said. She went with them. Another pause. Longer. Why would she? Because they told her something, Min-Jae said. Something that made her believe going with them was the only way to protect what she's been carrying. He could hear the investigator processing that. The document, Min-Jae said. Silence. She has a document, Min-Jae continued. The founding architecture of the entire network. She's been holding it for 8 years. Tonight someone told her that if she didn't come willingly and bring it with her, they would do something she couldn't allow. What? The investigator asked. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. Me, he said quietly. They threatened to kill me. Not arrest me. Not destroy what I've built. Kill me. And Amara, who has spent 8 years making decisions designed to keep me away from this, walked out of that car and went with them to stop that from happening. The line was quiet. She traded herself for you, the investigator said. Yes. That's... I know, Min-Jae said. He was already moving toward the elevator. I need a location, he said. Every resource we have, every contact, every trace of movement in the last 20 minutes, I need to know where they took her. We're already running it, the investigator said. But Min-Jae, if this is who I think it is based on the network's upper structure. It is, Min-Jae said. Then the location won't be findable through conventional tracking. She doesn't operate in spaces that leave traces. Then we find her through the document, Min-Jae said. A pause. What do you mean? The document is the only thing she wants, Min-Jae said. Which means she won't move against Amara until she has it. Which means Amara is safe for exactly as long as she refuses to hand it over. He stepped into the elevator. And Amara is the most stubborn person I have ever known. For the first time in what felt like days, the investigator almost laughed. Almost. How much time does that buy us? The investigator asked. Enough, Min-Jae said. He pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed. And behind him, Ji-Hoon stood alone in the 43rd floor of a building that bore his name and watched the elevator numbers descend and understood with complete clarity that he was looking at the end of everything he had built in one version of his life. And the beginning of whatever came next in a version he hadn't yet imagined. Min-Jae hit the lobby and moved fast. Through the marble entrance. Through the glass doors. Into the night air that felt different now, charged, directional, like weather with an agenda. His driver was waiting. Drive, Min-Jae said as he got in. I'll give you the direction in a moment. He opened his phone. Pulled up a contact he hadn't used in over a year. A woman named Dr. Song. Not a doctor of medicine. A doctor of information architecture. The most precise mind Min-Jae had ever encountered when it came to the structure of hidden systems. The person who, 2 years ago, had helped him understand the layered anatomy of a financial fraud so complex that 3 regulatory bodies had failed to map it. She answered on the second ring. I wondered when you'd call, she said. Her voice was dry and unhurried the way genuinely brilliant people's voices often are, unimpressed by urgency because they've already thought past it. I need to find someone who doesn't leave traces, Min-Jae said. Everyone leaves traces, Dr. Song replied. The difference is what kind and where. A woman who operates through complete intermediary distance. No direct communications. No registered assets. Nothing traceable to a single identity. You're describing someone who's been building that invisibility for decades. Yes. Then she has an origin point, Dr. Song said simply. Nobody starts invisible. They become invisible. Which means somewhere, in some system, some archive, some record that predates the effort to disappear, there is a version of her that existed before she decided she didn't. Min-Jae felt the logic of that land with the clean satisfaction of a key turning in a lock. I'm sending you a name, he said. Send it. He did. A pause. Short. But not the pause of someone drawing a blank. The pause of someone who recognizes something. "Where did you get this?" Dr. Song asked. Her voice had shifted, not frightened, but recalibrated. The way a person recalibrates when a problem turns out to be larger than the initial description. "It doesn't matter," Min-Jae said. "It matters to me," she said. "Because if you're moving against this particular person, I need to understand the scope of what I'm helping with." "You're helping me find a location," Min-Jae said. "That's all." Min-Jae. Her voice was careful now. "Precise. I have encountered the financial signature of this name twice in my career. Both times it was connected to the collapse of something that appeared completely stable from the outside. A government institution the first time. A multinational the second." She paused. "She doesn't take. She replaces. She moves into the space left by the thing she destroys, and she builds something that looks completely different but serves exactly the same function for exactly the same purpose." "I know," Min-Jae said. "You know, and you're still moving toward her. She is someone I protect." A long pause. "Give me 40 minutes, Dr. Song said. "I'll give you 20. A short exhale that might have been exasperation or might have been the sound of someone shifting into a higher gear. 20, she agreed. The line went quiet. Min-Jae lowered the phone and looked out the window at the city moving past him. 20 minutes. Amara had the document. The woman wanted the document. Which meant the next 20 minutes were the hinge point of the entire war. Everything before tonight had been architecture, the careful, brutal, brilliant work of dismantling a structure that had been designed to be undismantlable. But this, right now, was different. This was the moment when the architecture stopped mattering. When it came down to two things. How fast Min-Jae could move. And how long Amara could hold. His phone buzzed. A message. Not from the investigator. Not from Dr. Song. Not from an unknown number. From Amara. One line. Sent 3 minutes ago, which meant she had sent it before they took her phone. Which meant she had planned for this moment. Which meant, even in the middle of being taken, she had been thinking ahead. Min-Jae opened the message. "Read it." And for the first time in this entire war, in all the sleepless hours and calculated moves and moments of cold fury and quiet grief, something shifted behind his eyes that was not strategy and not anger and not the particular brand of controlled intensity that had carried him through 72 hours of warfare. It was something softer than all of those things. And sharper. The message said, "The document is not what they think it is. I changed it. Years ago. What they've been hunting for 8 years is a shell. The real one is somewhere they will never find it. Don't come for me. Finish it. I trust you." Min-Jae read it twice. Then he leaned back in his seat. And he smiled. Not the cold smile of a man who has outmaneuvered someone. The real one. The one that almost never came. Because Amara, brilliant, impossible, infuriating, extraordinary Amara, had not spent 8 years simply carrying a document. She had spent 8 years carrying a trap. And the most powerful invisible woman in the network had just walked directly into it. If you just read that last line and felt everything shift, welcome to the real game. Comment right now. Did you underestimate Amara this whole time? Because she has been the most dangerous person in this story from the very beginning, and we are only just now seeing it fully. Like this, share it everywhere, subscribe if you haven't, because the next segment is where Amara stops being the person being rescued and becomes the person doing the rescuing. The hunter becomes the hunted. Amara had learned one thing above everything else in 8 years of carrying a secret that could destroy an empire. Panic was a luxury she could never afford. The moment they had come for her, the moment the car door had opened and the voice had spoken with that particular brand of quiet authority that doesn't ask, doesn't threaten, simply states, she had made a calculation in under 3 seconds. Go with them. Not because she was afraid. Because she was ready. She had always known this moment was coming. Not in the abstract way that people know things they hope will never arrive. In the specific, detailed, fully prepared way of someone who had spent 8 years building for exactly this night. She sat in the back of the vehicle now, dark interior, blacked out windows, 2 people flanking her on either side with the careful professional distance of individuals who had been told she was important and therefore not to be damaged. That told her something. They needed her compliant. which meant they needed something from her, which meant she still had leverage. She kept her hands still in her lap, kept her breathing even, kept her face arranged in the expression she had practiced more times than she could count, the look of someone who had accepted the situation. Resigned. Cooperative. Defeated enough to be manageable. It was the most useful mask she owned. The vehicle moved through the city in a route she was memorizing turn by turn, not because she expected to retrace it on foot, but because information was always worth collecting even when you didn't yet know what you'd use it for. Left. Left. Right. Underpass. Elevated road. A descent that felt like a ramp into a structure below street level. A private facility. Underground. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened. She was guided, not roughly, not gently, simply efficiently, through a corridor that was cleaner and more architecturally considered than anything she had seen in the network's other locations. This wasn't a hideout. This was a headquarters. The real one. The one that had never appeared in any file, any investigation, any of the data Min-Jae's team had spent days extracting from the network's exposed layers. Because this space had never been part of those layers. It existed entirely apart from everything that had just been dismantled. Which confirmed what Amara had suspected for years. The woman at the top had always been prepared to sacrifice every layer beneath her. She had built the network the way you build a structure, designed to be demolished, knowing from the beginning that the demolition was part of the plan. The corridor opened into a room. Large. Quiet. Precisely lit in a way that felt intentional, not harsh, not dim, but calibrated. The kind of lighting that puts the person in the room on display while leaving the person behind the desk in something slightly softer. A power arrangement. Designed to feel like a conversation while functioning like an interrogation. Amara had sat in rooms like this before. She knew exactly what they were for. The woman behind the desk looked up. And Amara looked at her. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Because sometimes two people enter a room and immediately understand, without a word exchanged, without a gesture or a posture or a preliminary, that they've been moving toward this exact moment for a very long time. The woman was older than Amara had imagined. Not elderly, not diminished in any way that age sometimes diminishes people, but marked by time in the way that genuine power marks its carriers. Like pressure marks stone. Like decades of absolute control leave a particular kind of stillness in a person that looks like calm, but is actually something more absolute. Amara, the woman said. Her voice was warm. That was the most unsettling thing about it. Genuinely warm. The way a person sounds when they're speaking to someone they have studied so thoroughly that they feel they already know them. You look exactly as I expected, the woman continued. Amara said nothing. Sit down, the woman said. Not unkindly. Not as a command. As an invitation that both of them understood was not optional. Amara sat. She folded her hands in her lap. Kept her spine straight. Kept her eyes level and direct, not challenging, not submissive, simply present. Simply there. The way she had learned to be in rooms where every signal she sent would be read and interpreted and used. You've been very difficult to reach, the woman said. I wasn't hiding, Amara replied. I was waiting. Something moved across the woman's face. Interest. Genuine interest, the kind that doesn't get performed, that arrives involuntarily when someone says something unexpected. Waiting, the woman repeated. For the moment when it made sense to end this, Amara said. The woman studied her. And does it make sense now? It will, Amara said. Soon. If you thought Amara was just a piece being moved across this board, look at her now. Comment right now and tell me, when did you realize she was never just a victim in this story? The woman leaned back in her chair slightly. The gesture of someone who is reassessing. You sent him a message, the woman said. Not a question. Yes, Amara said. Before we took your phone. Yes. What did it say? Amara held her gaze. You already know, she said. You intercepted it. The woman smiled faintly. I did, she said. I wanted to hear your version. My version is the same as the message, Amara said. The document you've been looking for is not what you think it is. You changed it, the woman said. Years ago. The founding architecture, the original structure, the hidden mechanisms, the names and accounts and operational framework, all of it altered. Enough to be useless, Amara said. The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Amara had not prepared for. I know, she said. The room shifted. Amara kept her face still. But something moved behind her eyes that she couldn't entirely suppress. I've known for 4 years, the woman continued pleasantly, that the document you've been carrying is a shell. That the real one, the original, is elsewhere. She tilted her head. Did you really think I built all of this without accounting for that possibility? Amara said nothing. The document you're carrying is bait, the woman said. I've always known that. Which is why I never sent anyone to simply take it from you. She paused. I needed you to bring it to me willingly. Because the document isn't what I actually want. The silence in the room sharpened. What I want, the woman said slowly, is what you built into the shell. Amara felt the hairs on her arms rise. Very slightly. Very controlled. You're a remarkable architect, the woman said. Did you know that? Not of documents. Of systems. Of hidden structures within structures. The real document, the one you altered, you didn't just change the information inside it. You embedded something in the architecture of the alteration itself. She leaned forward. A key, she said. You built a key into the shell document. Something that doesn't look like a key unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Something that unlocks a separate system, a separate cache of information that you've been building for 8 years. The room was absolutely still. Not just the network's founding documents, the woman said. Everything you collected during the 8 years since you left. Every piece of evidence you gathered from the outside while they watched you. Every file, every transaction record, every communication you intercepted through channels they didn't know you had access to. Her voice was almost admiring. You didn't just run from the network when you left, she said. You spent 8 years building a case against it. Amara held her gaze. And said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. The woman was right. And they both knew it. The question, the woman said, is not whether I can get the document from you. I can. The question is whether you're going to make that process complicated. She folded her hands on the desk. Or whether we're going to have a conversation like 2 intelligent women who understand exactly what is at stake and make an arrangement that works for both of us. Amara studied her. What kind of arrangement? She asked. The woman smiled. And it was the smile of someone who has been waiting a very long time to have a particular conversation. Subscribe right now if you haven't already, because the dynamic in this room is about to turn in a direction nobody is expecting. Amara is not here to negotiate. She never was. Outside, across the city, Min-Jae's phone rang. Dr. Song. 17 minutes. 3 minutes ahead of schedule. I have something, Dr. Song said. Her voice had the quality it got when she had found exactly what she was looking for, not excited, but precise. The verbal equivalent of a laser finding its mark. Tell me, Min-Jae said. The name you sent me. I traced the origin point, the version of her that existed before the disappearance. 31 years ago. A registered business address in the financial district. A consultancy that operated for 18 months before dissolving. She paused. The address is no longer a consultancy. What is it now? On the surface, a decommissioned commercial building. Sold 4 times in 30 years. Currently listed as under renovation by a holding company that traces back through 6 intermediaries to a trust registered in a jurisdiction that doesn't cooperate with international information requests. But, Min-Jae said. But the utility connections to the building have never been decommissioned, Dr. Song said. Power. Water. Climate control. All active. All drawing consistent usage patterns that don't match a building under renovation. Min-Jae's eyes sharpened. Someone is using it, he said. Someone has been using it continuously for at least 11 years, Dr. Song confirmed. Below street level. The power draw suggests a significant operational space. Climate controlled to a degree that suggests server infrastructure. And she paused. Soundproofed. The acoustic signature of the building's external walls was modified in a renovation permit filed 9 years ago. The permit describes installation of specialized insulation materials. They built a facility underneath it, Min-Jae said. A complete one, Dr. Song confirmed. Hidden in plain sight. in a building that sits 4 blocks from the financial district's main regulatory offices. Min-Jae processed that. 4 blocks from the institutions that would have been investigating the network. Close enough to monitor them. Far enough to be invisible. Send me the address, he said. Already sent. A pause. Min-Jae. Yes. Go carefully, she said. The woman you're dealing with, the origin I traced, I found one more thing before I called you. What? She built the network originally as a legitimate operation, Dr. Song said. 30 years ago, it was a real financial consultancy. A real business. It turned into what it became slowly, over years, through a series of decisions that each individually looked defensible. Min-Jae said nothing. I'm telling you this, Dr. Song continued, because people who started with something legitimate and corrupted it over decades are more dangerous than people who started corrupt. They still believe somewhere, in some part of themselves, that what they built serves a purpose. That the damage was necessary. That the outcome justifies the architecture. She won't negotiate, Min-Jae said. No, Dr. Song agreed. She will not. Min-Jae looked at the address on his phone. Thank you, he said. He ended the call. Turned to his driver. Gave the address. The car accelerated. Back in the room below the city, Amara was still watching the woman across the desk from her. The proposed arrangement had been laid out. Quietly. Precisely. With the particular kind of reasonableness that very dangerous people deploy when they want something badly enough to make it sound rational. Hand over the key embedded in the shell document. Walk away with her life. Walk away with Min-Jae's safety guaranteed. Walk away with the quiet understanding that the network, restructured, rebuilt, operating under a different architecture in a different form, would leave both of them entirely alone. It was a clean offer. It was also completely false. Amara knew that. The woman across from her knew that Amara knew that. And yet the offer had been made anyway. Because the woman needed Amara to respond to it. Needed her to engage with it. Needed the conversation to continue long enough for the extraction to happen, for whatever technical process the woman had prepared to pull the key from the document's architecture once Amara produced it. Which meant the woman needed Amara to produce the document. Which Amara had not yet done. I need time to consider, Amara said. The woman studied her. Of course, she said. As if this was entirely expected. As if patience was something she had in unlimited supply. Because she did. She had been patient for 30 years. A few more minutes was nothing. Amara looked at her hands in her lap. And beneath the stillness, beneath the mask, beneath the calculation, beneath 8 years of preparation for this exact room, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not fear. Not doubt. Relief. Because Min-Jae had read her message. And Min-Jae never read a message without responding to it. Not with words. With action. Which meant somewhere above her, above the soundproofed walls, and the hidden facility and the 30-year architecture of a woman who had built her invisibility with extraordinary patience, something was already moving. She just needed to buy a little more time. She looked up at the woman. Tell me one thing, Amara said. The woman tilted her head. When this is over, Amara said, when you have what you want, what does the next version look like? What do you rebuild it into? The woman looked at her for a long moment. And then, just like that, she began to answer. Because that was the thing about people who had spent decades building something they believed in. When someone finally asked them about the vision, the real one, the one underneath everything, they couldn't help themselves. They talked. And while she talked, 4 blocks away, Min-Jae's car turned onto the street. If you just felt the walls of this story closing in from every direction at once, good. That's exactly where we are. Comment right now, are you Team Amara holding her ground or Team Min-Jae coming through that door? Like this post, share it with everyone, and subscribe because the next segment is the collision. Everything. Everyone. All at once. The document. The woman. The choice that cannot be undone. It's all arriving in one place at the same time. You do not want to miss it. The street was quiet. The kind of quiet that a city produces in the specific hours between the end of night and the beginning of morning, when the people who belong to the dark have finished their work and the people who belong to the light haven't yet started theirs. Min-Jae's car stopped half a block from the address. He got out. Stood on the pavement. Looked at the building. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like. Unremarkable. Fenced. Draped in the visual language of a construction site, barriers and signage, and the suggestion of renovation that had been carefully maintained for years to discourage curiosity without attracting attention. A building that said, without saying anything, there is nothing here worth stopping for. Min-Jae had spent 11 years learning to read the difference between things that were genuinely empty and things that had been designed to appear that way. This was the second kind. His investigator appeared at his shoulder. Quietly. Efficiently. The way the man always materialized, as if he had been present for longer than you realized and had simply chosen this moment to make himself visible. For entry points, the investigator said. 2 at street level, both monitored. 1 at the rear of the building through the renovation barrier. 1 below, a service access that connects to the city's older utility infrastructure. Which one is least expected? Min-Jae asked. The utility access, the investigator said. It's the most technically demanding to find and navigate. They'll have it monitored, but they'll consider it low probability. Then that's the one, Min-Jae said. The investigator nodded. There's something else, he said. Min-Jae looked at him. We identified 2 of the 3 names from the envelope, the investigator said. Both are already being handled. Federal contacts activated. Asset freezes initiated. They won't be able to move or communicate within the next 20 minutes. And the third name? Min-Jae asked. Is the woman inside that building, the investigator said. Min-Jae turned back to the building. Then she's the last piece, he said. Yes. A pause. Min-Jae. The investigator's voice shifted slightly, not unprofessional, but human. The sound of someone who had been beside a person through something significant and felt the weight of what was about to happen. Whatever is in that building, however this ends, I need you to know that what you've done in the last 72 hours is something most people would not have survived. Strategically. Emotionally. He paused. Both. Min-Jae looked at him briefly. We're not finished yet, he said. No, the investigator agreed. But we're close. Min-Jae nodded once. Then he moved. The utility access was exactly where the investigator said it would be. A maintenance panel behind the renovation barrier, old iron, slightly rusted at the edges in a way that was authentic rather than decorative, connected to a shaft that descended 8 feet before opening into a corridor that ran beneath the building's foundation. Min-Jae moved through it with the investigator 2 steps behind him. The corridor was lit with the low, functional lighting of infrastructure, not designed for human occupation, not designed for comfort. Designed purely for the occasional maintenance worker who needed to service pipes and conduits that kept the building above operational. Except this infrastructure hadn't been maintained in the conventional sense for a long time. It had been repurposed. The walls had been reinforced at intervals. The original utility components were still present, cover intact, but behind them, running alongside them, was a secondary system. Newer. More sophisticated. The kind of installation that required significant expertise to complete invisibly alongside existing infrastructure. Whoever had built this had spent real money and real time doing it right. Min-Jae kept moving. At the end of the corridor, a door. Steel. Modern. Completely inconsistent with everything around it. He stopped in front of it. Looked at the investigator, who produced a device the size of a thick pen and held it against the door's electronic panel. 7 seconds. The light on the panel shifted from red to green. The door opened. If you've been holding your breath for the last 3 segments, exhale. And then immediately hold it again. Because this is where it all comes together. Like this right now and keep reading. Inside the facility, Amara was still talking. Or rather, the woman was still talking. Which was exactly what Amara needed. She had asked the right question. The one that opened the door to the vision, to the 30-year architecture of belief that the woman had constructed around everything she had built and everything she had destroyed in the building of it. And the woman, brilliant, controlled, patient beyond what most people could comprehend, had walked through that door. Not naively. Not without awareness that Amara was buying time. But because the question had been genuine. And genuine questions, even from adversaries, even in rooms built for leverage, deserved genuine answers. That was the thing Amara had understood about this woman from the moment she walked into the room. She was not simply corrupt. She was convinced. She believed, with the particular ferocity of someone who has sacrificed enough to require the sacrifice to have meant something, that what she was building was necessary. That the network, in its next form, would correct something broken in the architecture of financial power that no legitimate institution had been willing or able to fix. She was wrong. Profoundly. Completely. In ways that had cost real people real things. But she believed it. And belief, even broken belief, has a shape you can hold a conversation around. The system as it exists, the woman was saying, rewards proximity to existing power. It does not reward capability. It does not reward vision. It rewards access. And access is inherited. It is given to the people who already have it and withheld from everyone else. She held Amara's gaze. What I built was a correction to that. A parallel infrastructure that could move resources to where they were genuinely needed without requiring permission from institutions that were designed to prevent exactly that movement. By destroying people who got in the way, Amara said. The woman's expression didn't flinch. By making necessary decisions, she said, that no one with legitimate authority was willing to make. The people on that list, Amara said quietly. The ones whose livelihoods were erased. The companies deliberately collapsed. The individuals financially destroyed. She paused. Were they necessary decisions? The woman was quiet. For just a moment, just one unguarded moment, something moved across her face that was neither composure nor conviction. It was the thing that lives underneath both of those. Doubt. Not enough to change anything, but enough to confirm that it was there. That it had always been there. Every architecture has a cost, the woman said finally. Yes, Amara said. It does. And then from somewhere behind the far wall, a sound. Subtle. The kind that wouldn't register to someone who wasn't listening for it. But Amara was listening for it. Had been listening for it since the moment she sat down. She kept her eyes on the woman. Kept her expression exactly as it had been. And felt, for the first time since the car door had opened and she had made the decision to go with them, something loosen in her chest. He was here. The facility opened into 3 connected spaces. Min-Jae and the investigator moved through the first 2 quickly and quietly, server infrastructure in one, monitoring equipment in the other, both unmanned at this hour in a way that suggested the skeleton crew had been deliberately reduced. Another sign that the woman had anticipated a final confrontation. She had cleared the space around it. Just her and Amara. 2 people at the center of everything. The third room had a door with light visible beneath it. Min-Jae stopped outside it. He could hear voices. One of them was Amara's. Something in him that had been running on pure strategy and forward momentum for 72 hours responded to the sound of her voice with something older and simpler than any of that. She was here. She was speaking. She was herself. He put his hand on the door. The investigator positioned himself to one side. Min-Jae pushed it open and stepped through. The woman looked up the moment the door opened. Her composure didn't shatter, but it shifted in the way that the surface of still water shifts when something moves beneath it. She looked at Min-Jae, then at Amara, then back at Min-Jae. And in the space of those 2 glances, she recalculated everything, ran every remaining variable, assessed every option still available, measured the distance between where she was and where she needed to be, and arrived at a conclusion. Min-Jae could see it happen. He had watched enough people arrive at conclusions in high-pressure rooms to recognize the moment. Mr. Kong, she said. Her voice was entirely composed. Entirely present. As if he had arrived for a scheduled meeting. I wondered how long the utility corridor would take you. Longer than I'd like, Min-Jae said. Shorter than you hoped. He stepped into the room fully. His eyes went to Amara. She met his gaze. And in the language that exists between 2 people who have been through something enormous together, a language made of small signals and the particular quality of stillness that replaces words when words are insufficient, she told him what he needed to know. I'm all right. I held. We're still in control. He looked back at the woman. It's over, he said. The woman studied him. Is it, she said. Not quite a question. The other 2 names from the network's upper structure are already in custody, Min-Jae said. Their assets are frozen. Their communications are cut. Every layer beneath them that wasn't already dismantled in the last 72 hours is being handled right now by federal contacts in 4 jurisdictions. He took a slow step forward. Your facility is surrounded, he continued. Not aggressively. Quietly. The way you've always preferred things to be done. He paused. I thought you'd appreciate the consistency. Something moved across the woman's face that was almost appreciation. You're thorough, she said. I learned from watching thorough people, Min-Jae replied. The woman was quiet. She looked at Amara again. The document, she said. Is exactly what I told you it was, Amara said. A shell. With a key embedded in it that doesn't lead to a hidden cache. She held the woman's gaze. It leads to a dead end that I built 8 years ago specifically for this room. Specifically for you. The woman absorbed that. The real evidence, Amara continued, was never in a document. It was never in a single file or a single location. It's distributed. Redundant. Held by people and institutions across multiple jurisdictions who have had instructions for years about when and how to activate it. She paused. Tonight is when. The woman looked between them. And Min-Jae watched something happen that he had not seen in anyone he had faced in 72 hours of warfare. He watched the woman completely, entirely, without theater or drama, accept it. Not collapse. Not rage. Accept. The way someone accepts something they always knew was possible and had simply chosen not to prioritize among all the other possibilities they were managing. You built for this specific outcome, the woman said to Amara. Quietly. With something that sounded impossibly, unexpectedly, like genuine respect. For 8 years, Amara said. While appearing to simply be running, the woman said. While appearing to simply be running, Amara confirmed. A silence settled over the room. Not hostile. Not warm. Simply final. The silence of something that has reached its natural conclusion. I have one question, the woman said. Min-Jae nodded once. The network, she said. The next version. The corrective architecture I was building. She looked at him directly. Do you understand what problem it was trying to solve? Even if you reject every method. Min-Jae held her gaze. Yes, he said. And? The problem is real, he said. The method was indefensible. The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then perhaps, she said quietly, someone with better methods should build something. Min-Jae said nothing. But he didn't look away. The investigator appeared in the doorway behind him. The woman saw him. Understood what his presence meant. She stood from her desk, slowly, with full dignity, and straightened her jacket in a gesture so composed it belonged to a different kind of moment entirely. I'll cooperate, she said. Fully. Every remaining name. Every structure. Every account. She paused. On one condition. You're not in a position to set conditions, the investigator said. One condition, she repeated, looking only at Min-Jae. He waited. That what I built, the corrective intention underneath all of it, that someone looks at it. Not to rehabilitate my legacy. Not to excuse anything. She held his gaze. But because the problem I was trying to solve doesn't go away because I do. Min-Jae looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. I'll look at it, he said. Not as a concession. As a truth. Because he was a man who had spent 11 years building things. And he understood, even in this room, even at the end of this particular war, that the instinct to build something was not always the same as the thing that got built. The woman nodded. Then she walked toward the door. And everything finally, completely, after 72 hours of warfare and 8 years of preparation and 11 years of a betrayal that had been in motion before Min-Jae ever knew there was something to defend against, began to close. They came out of the building together. Min-Jae and Amara. Into the specific quality of light that exists in the last 40 minutes before a city's sunrise, not dark, not bright, but the particular blue-gray of the world holding itself just before it commits to the day. They stood on the pavement. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The sounds of the city's early hours moved around them, distant, ordinary, completely indifferent to the thing that had just concluded beneath the street they were standing on. Amara looked at her hands. 8 years, she said quietly. I know, Min-Jae replied. I should have told you earlier. I should have trusted you with all of it from the beginning. Yes, he said. You should have. She looked at him. He looked back. But I understand why you didn't, he said. She exhaled. Slowly. The way someone exhales when they have been holding something for a very long time and have finally been given permission to set it down. What happens now? She asked. Min-Jae looked at the street ahead. At the city beginning its slow, inevitable process of waking up. At everything that existed on the other side of this night. Now, he said, we build something better. She looked at him. Together, she asked. He turned to look at her fully. And the expression on his face was not the cold composure of the war room, not the calculated intensity of a man who had spent 72 hours dismantling a network built to destroy him. It was simply him. Together, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then, quietly, without theater, without the drama that had surrounded every moment of the last several days, she leaned her head against his shoulder. And he let her. And for a long moment they stood like that on the pavement while the city turned slowly toward morning and the last pieces of everything they had survived settled into whatever shape the future was going to take. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was an honest one. And sometimes, in stories as in life, that is the better thing to have. 3 months later, Min-Jae sat at a desk in a building that did not bear his name. A smaller building. A quieter one. The office of a new foundation, independent, transparent, publicly accountable, dedicated to exactly the problem the woman in the underground facility had identified and catastrophically failed to solve. The redistribution of financial access to people who had the capability but not the proximity. On his desk, the founding documents. On the other side of the desk, Amara. Across the city, Ji-Hoon, cooperating fully with federal investigators. Navigating the long and complicated process of accountability for a man who had built real things and betrayed real people simultaneously and would spend years living in the space between those two facts. In 4 separate jurisdictions, the remaining members of the network dismantled, processed, the evidence Amara had spent 8 years assembling doing exactly the work it had been built to do. And in a quiet room in a facility that was neither comfortable nor punishing, the woman who had built 30 years of the wrong architecture toward the right problem, cooperating fully. Her knowledge of the network's every structure and mechanism more valuable to its undoing than anything else anyone could have offered. Min-Jae picked up a pen. Looked at the founding documents. Looked at Amara. Ready? She asked. He signed his name. She signed hers. And whatever came next, the complications, the new battles, the inevitable resistance of people who profit from systems staying broken, they would face it the way they had faced everything in the last 72 hours. Together. Prepared. And completely unwilling to stop. And that is where we leave them. Not at the end of everything. At the beginning of the next thing. Which is always, always the more interesting place to be. If you made it all the way to the end of part 7, you're the kind of reader this story was made for. Comment below and tell me everything. What hit hardest? What surprised you most? Was it Ji-Hoon? Was it Amara's 8-year trap? Was it the woman in the basement and the problem underneath the crime? Tell me. Share this story with everyone who needs to read it from part 1, because this is the kind of story that deserves to be experienced from the beginning. Like every part, subscribe so you never miss what comes next, and drop your thoughts below because this community is what makes stories like this worth telling. Part 8, a new chapter, a new threat, a new game, is coming. And if you thought part 7 was the end, you haven't been paying attention. It never ends. It only evolves. Stay ready. Part 8 coming soon.